Hello and welcome. I'm Aiden, your narrator for tonight. As the day slowly drifts away, this is your time to rest, to soften your thoughts, and to let the weight of the day gently fall behind you. Let your breathing become slow and steady, and allow your body to grow a little heavier, a little calmer, with each passing moment. Tonight, we will float out over calm water and follow a little whale named Miran on the first long journey of his life. The sea around him is wide, blue, and full of quiet wonders. Some places shimmer beneath the golden light of the sun. Some glow softly in the dark, like hidden lanterns beneath the waves. And some places feel new and strange at first, until they begin to feel gentle, familiar, and full of quiet welcome. Miran has never traveled quite this far before. The world beyond his home is vast, peaceful, and filled with things he does not yet understand. But with each wave that carries him forward, he will discover that the ocean has its own patient way of teaching. It does not hurry. It does not overwhelm. It simply opens, little by little, revealing its beauty to those who are willing to move through it with wonder. As Miran travels, he will meet many creatures of the sea. Each one has a small gift to offer him: a thought, a lesson, a memory, or a new way of seeing the world more clearly. Through these gentle encounters, he will begin to understand that courage does not always need to be loud. Curiosity does not need to rush, and trusting yourself often begins by listening carefully to the quiet wisdom already growing inside you. Along the way, Miran will learn that every journey changes us in small and meaningful ways. Every new horizon holds something to discover. Every meeting leaves behind a little light. And sometimes, the very first step into the unknown becomes the beginning of feeling stronger, wiser, and more at home within yourself. So settle in now. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your breathing become slow and easy. Imagine the sea rocking gently beneath a silver sky, the water calm, the stars above soft and endless, and let this story carry you peacefully toward rest. This is the little whale's journey. The sea was quiet in the hour before sunrise. The water in the bay held the last deep blue of night, but far away at the edge of the world, a pale silver light was beginning to grow. The waves did not rush. They lifted and lowered with a slow, sleepy rhythm, as though the whole ocean were breathing in its dreams. Near the center of the bay floated a young whale named Miran. He was not the smallest whale in his family anymore, yet he still felt very young whenever he looked beyond the curved arms of home and saw how wide the world could be. He had spent many peaceful mornings here, gliding through familiar water, listening to the soft songs of his mother and the deep, warm sounds of older whales farther out at sea. But this morning was different. Today would be the first day of his first long journey. Miran rose slowly and let the cool air touch his face as he breathed. The sky above him was turning from blue to silver, and the wind carried the clean scent of salt and distance. Out beyond the bay, the ocean seemed endless. It shimmered with promise. It shimmered with mystery. It shimmered, too, with a little fear. His mother swam beside him, close enough that Miran could feel the calm strength of her movement through the water. "You are quiet," she said. "I am listening," Miran answered. "To what?" He looked toward the horizon. "To everything. To the waves. To the wind. To my heart. I think they are all saying different things." His mother's eyes softened. That often happens before a journey. Miran dipped one fin beneath the water and watched the silver ripples spread. "Part of me wants to see everything," he said. "The reefs, the deep places, the northern water you told me about. But another part of me wants to stay here where I already know the sounds." His mother swam in a slow circle around him, not to trap him, but to remind him that love could surround him, even when he felt unsure. "The ocean is wide," she said, "but it is not waiting to trick you. It teaches slowly. It shows one thing at a time. You do not need to know the whole sea today. You only need to meet the next wave." Miran thought about that. The next wave came, rose under him, and passed without hurry. He liked the sound of that. Not the whole sea, only the next wave. The sun began to lift, and with it, light poured gently across the water. The bay changed all at once. Silver became pearl. Pearl became gold. The skin of the sea gleamed softly around them. Farther out, a group of gulls crossed the sky like strokes of white paint. Somewhere below, a school of small fish turned together, flashing like coins in the clear water. "It is time," his mother said. The words did not feel sharp. They felt round and kind. Still, Miran's chest tightened. What if I forget something important? "You will," she said, and then she smiled in the whale way that moved through her whole body. "Everyone does. Then you will remember what matters most. Slow breath, open eyes, gentle choices. And when you are uncertain, listen inward before you rush outward." Miran gave a small, nervous splash. That sounds wise. "It is also simple," she said. "The best wisdom often is." A few other whales from the pod gathered nearby to see him off. They circled him once, humming a low, beautiful note that made the water tremble softly around his body. It was not a grand song. It was a home song, a blessing song, a song that said, "Wherever you go, you remain connected to us." Miran felt the music settle inside him. Then he turned toward the opening of the bay. At first, he did not swim fast. He moved gently, as though testing a door that had always been open, but that he had never crossed alone. The water changed as he passed beyond the sheltering curve of rock and kelp. It felt broader somehow, cooler and deeper. Even the sound of it changed. Home had been full of layered echoes. Here the sounds stretched out longer, with more space between them. He looked back once. His mother lifted her head above the water and called to him, "Trust your pace." He answered with a soft note of his own and kept going. The farther he traveled, the more the morning opened. Sunlight warmed the upper water. Tiny creatures drifted below him like living dust. Sometimes he swam near the surface and watched the sky widen. Sometimes he dipped lower and listened to the language of currents moving over hidden ridges in the sea floor. After a while, the fear inside him did not disappear, but it changed shape. It became less like a wall and more like a small companion swimming beside curiosity. They were both there together now. Wonder on one side, worry on the other. Miran held them both and kept moving. By midday, he reached a place where the water brightened into clear turquoise, and far below he began to see bursts of color blooming from the sea floor. A reef, he thought. His first new place. He slowed, not because he wanted to stop, but because he remembered what his mother had said. You do not need to know the whole sea today, only the next wave. So he breathed in, breathed out, lowered himself gently toward the shining world below. And with the silver morning now behind him, and a bright reef waiting ahead, Miran began to understand that a journey was not one enormous leap into the unknown. It was 1,000 calm arrivals. The reef looked like a garden dreamed by sunlight. As Miran drifted lower into the warm, clear water, he saw great branches of coral spreading from the sea floor in pinks, golds, oranges, and soft violet shades. Some rose like little trees, some curled like sleeping hands, some looked as if they had been carved from colored clouds and then left there for fish to explore. Tiny silver fish flashed between them in quick, shining turns. Yellow fish moved in small groups like drifting petals. A striped fish peered at Miran from behind a coral fan, decided he was interesting, and darted away again. Everywhere he looked, something new appeared. He wanted to look at all of it at once, but there was too much beauty for that. So he circled slowly, taking one quiet view at a time. A bold little blue fish swam up to him and hovered just in front of his nose. "You are large," she announced. Miran blinked. "And you are small." The fish flicked her tail. "That is true. My name is Luma. Are you lost?" "No," said Miran, then paused. "At least, I do not think so." Luma seemed pleased by this answer. "Good. Lost creatures usually swim in circles and make the water nervous. You are swimming in wide thoughts. That is different." "I am traveling for the first time," said Miran. "Everything here is so bright that I do not know where to look."
Then do not look everywhere, Luma said at once. Look properly.
She spun and zipped away. Miran, curious, followed as carefully as he could. Luma led him past coral towers and through a narrow opening where the water glittered green and gold. There she stopped beside a patch of coral that Miran had almost passed without noticing. At first it seemed plain compared to the brighter shapes nearby. Then he saw tiny white shrimp cleaning its folds. A crab tucked itself under one ledge. Small fish sheltered in its branches whenever a shadow crossed above. It is not the loudest coral, said Luma, but many lives depend on it. Miran floated still. The reef around him no longer seemed like a single bright picture. It became many worlds layered together. Homes, pathways, hiding places, nurseries, resting corners. I almost missed it, he said. That is why I said to look properly, Luma replied. Seeing is not the same as glancing. She took him farther through the reef. This time Miran noticed more. He saw the slow pulse of an anemone's tentacles. He saw a pair of fish sharing a hollow in the stone. He saw sea fans bending with the current, never arguing with the water, only moving with it. At a shallow ridge, a ray of sunlight spread across the sand below like a pale ribbon. Luma asked, "What do you see there?" "Light," said Miran. "Look properly." He waited. Then he smiled. "A resting place. The sand is warm. The current is soft. It would be good for smaller creatures." Luma made a delighted loop in the water. "Exactly." They passed a cluster of bright fish who were arguing over nothing important at all. Then a sleepy eel who opened one eye as Miran went by and decided not to care. A tiny turtle paddled upward for air. Far off, the reef dropped away into deeper blue. As the afternoon softened, Miran and Luma rested beside a coral arch where the water moved lazily through stone openings, polished smooth by time. "Are you brave?" Luma asked suddenly. Miran thought about it. "I am trying to be." She nodded as though this were a serious and respectable answer. Most creatures think bravery means swimming fast into something large. But sometimes bravery is slowing down enough to understand where you are. Miran let those words settle. He had thought courage meant leaving home, crossing distance, pushing ahead. But here in the reef, with so much color and movement around him, the bravest thing had been to become quiet enough to notice. "I think I understand," he said. Luma twitched one fin. "Good. Then your reef lesson is complete." "My reef lesson?" "Yes. Every place gives one if you pay attention." Miran laughed softly, and the sound bubbled around him in the warm water. "Then I must collect many." "You probably will," Luma said. The sun shifted lower. Its beams turned softer, more golden now, and the reef glowed as though lit from inside. Creatures began changing their patterns. Some settled into cracks and shadows. Others emerged for the cooler hours. The whole place breathed in a new rhythm. "It will soon be evening," said Miran. "I should keep going." Luma swam beside him as he rose toward open water, Then carry this with you, she said. Curiosity is not grabbing at everything. Curiosity is loving the world enough to notice it well. Miran repeated the words carefully, the way one remembers a song. Loving the world enough to notice it well. Luma tipped sideways in approval. Now you sound like someone who is learning. At the edge of the reef, Miran paused and looked back one last time. It seemed even more beautiful now that he understood how much had been hidden in plain sight.
Thank you!
He called. Luma flashed once in the gold-green water. Travel gently, big thinker. Then he turned away from the reef and headed into the deepening blue of afternoon. He did not rush. His eyes were wider now, but softer too. The world had not grown smaller. It had grown richer. And with every calm breath, Miran felt that his first journey was already changing him. Not by making him harder or louder, but by making him more awake. By the next morning, the water had changed again. The bright reef was far behind him, and the sea below now rolled in long blue fields, deep and open. There were fewer quick flashes here, fewer busy swirls of fish, and more silence between one sound and the next. Miran found that he liked the change. The wide water gave his thoughts room to stretch. He swam through the cool morning light, rising now and then to breathe beneath a sky brushed with thin white clouds. Sometimes he sang a few quiet notes to himself, simply to feel company in the open sea. The notes faded softly behind him. Around midday, he heard an answering sound. It was low and steady, old in some way he could not explain. Not weak, but unhurried. It moved through the water like a long memory. Miran followed the sound until he found its source. A sea turtle swimming below him with a calm, ancient grace. His shell was broad and patterned with swirls and marks that looked like faded maps. The turtle lifted his head slightly. "You are following my song," he said. "I did not know it was a song," Miran answered.
Most true songs are also directions, said the turtle.
Miran dipped lower so they could travel side by side. "My name is Miran." "I am Solon," said the turtle. "And you are young enough to be in a hurry, even when you believe you are moving slowly." Miran gave a surprised little splash. "Am I?" Solon looked ahead with wise, patient eyes. "Not in your fins, in your mind." That felt true enough that Miran did not argue. For a while they swam without speaking. Solon's pace was measured and even. He did not seem concerned about how far he had come or how far remained. He simply moved as though each stroke belonged exactly where it was.
"I think I envy your calm," said Miran at last.
Solon chuckled, a sound like pebbles gently rolling in the tide. Calm is often only practiced patience. "Have you traveled far?" "I have crossed warm seas and cold ones. I have seen reefs grow and storms erase sandbars. I have returned to beaches I first knew when I was smaller than your tail." Miran stared with wonder. How do you remember so much? Solon tilted one flipper. I do not remember everything. I remember what I travel slowly enough to receive. Those words pleased Miran. He had heard something like them before in the reef, though said in another way. He began to suspect that the ocean liked repeating its wisdom through different voices, just to make sure young travelers heard it.
Later, Solon led him toward a drifting patch of warm current, where bits of seagrass floated on the surface, and tiny silver fish rested in the safer water beneath.
We will pause here, said the turtle. Miran almost said, but we only just met. We have barely gone anywhere. Yet he stopped himself. They floated in silence. At first, Miran noticed only stillness. Then, little by little, the stillness filled with detail. The current carried a faint mineral smell from distant underwater stone. Minute creatures ticked softly in the water around them. Somewhere deep below, a large body moved through the sea with dignified slowness. Far overhead, light shifted under passing clouds. You see? Solon asked, without looking at him. Yes, said Miran, though it felt like more than seeing. Many young swimmers believe a journey is a line from one place to another, Solon said. But a real journey is also a way of receiving time. If you hurry through it, time closes. If you move steadily, time opens. Miran rolled the idea around in his heart. Time opens. He liked that very much. Did you ever feel afraid when you first traveled alone? He asked. Solon was quiet for so long that Miran wondered if he had asked too much. Then the turtle said, Of course. Fear is not proof that you should turn back. It is often proof that you have reached the edge of what is familiar. What should I do when I feel it? Notice it. Breathe once. Then ask whether the fear is warning you or merely watching you. The two are not the same. That seemed like something worth remembering forever. The day moved on. Clouds gathered and thinned. The current beneath them shifted from warm to cool. Solon spoke from time to time about things he had seen. Long roads of migration across the ocean, moon-pulled tides, islands that appeared as dark blue dreams before sunrise. Each story made the sea seem larger. Each story also made it feel friendlier. By evening, they reached a place where strands of kelp began to appear in the water below, rising from unseen depths like long green ribbons. My path turns downward and west, said Solon. Yours, I think, will continue through that kelp forest. Miran looked ahead. The kelp swayed in broad clusters, beautiful but shadowed. It was lovely in a more secret way than the reef had been. I have never gone through a place like that, he admitted. Then you will learn from it. Solon's calm eyes rested on him. Remember this, young whale. Pace is a form of trust. When you keep a steady pace, you tell your heart that you believe there will be enough time to understand what comes next. Miran bowed his head slightly. Thank you, Solon. The turtle dipped one flipper in farewell and turned away with the same untroubled grace he had carried all day. Soon he was only a shape in the blue, then a memory in motion, then gone. Miran stayed still for a moment, listening to the wide evening sea. Then, at a measured pace, he swam toward the first swaying leaves of kelp, carrying with him a new kind of courage, the quiet kind that does not race ahead, but keeps faithful company with each breath. The kelp forest began where the sunlight softened. Long green ribbons rose from the ocean floor and stretched upward in tall, flowing columns. Some leaves shimmered gold where the light touched them. Others moved in darker green shadows, whispering together whenever the current passed through. The whole forest swayed and bent and straightened again with graceful patience. At first, Miran thought it was beautiful. Then he moved farther in. Soon the open sky above became broken into strips and patches by the drifting kelp. The water around him no longer felt wide. It felt layered and enclosed. Sound changed here too. It came in softer, stranger ways, brushing against leaf and stem before reaching his ears. He slowed, then he slowed again. The forest was not dangerous, not exactly, but it made him aware of his size. He had to angle his body carefully to pass between thicker stands. He could not see very far in any direction. The gentle moving shadows made every path look almost like every other path. For the first time since leaving home, Miran felt something colder than uncertainty. He felt lost. He turned one way, then another, trying to choose the clearest path. Each opening in the kelp closed a little as the plants shifted. Each clearing looked familiar to the last. The more he tried to hurry, the more the forest seemed to gather around him. His breathing shortened. Then he remembered Solon. Notice it. Breathe once. Miran stopped moving forward. He let himself float still among the swaying leaves and took one slow breath. The water rocked him gently. The kelp touched his side in a soft brushing motion, not a trapping one. He took another breath. That was when he saw a tiny shape curled around a narrow stalk of kelp just below him. It was a seahorse, small and pale gold, with bright, patient eyes. "You are making the forest nervous," she said, in a voice so light it almost sounded like part of the water. Miran would have laughed if he had not still felt embarrassed. "I think the forest is making me nervous." The seahorse considered this. "Perhaps both things are true. I am Neri. I am Miran. I did not mean to disturb anything. I only cannot tell where to go." Neri loosened her curled tail and drifted upward a little. Compared with Miran, she was tiny enough to fit inside one small thought. Yet she carried herself with such calm certainty that he immediately felt less alone. "The forest is easier when you stop asking it to be open water," she said. Miran blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means this place has its own way. You are trying to travel through it as though it should feel broad and simple. But the kelp asks for gentleness, patience, and narrow listening. Narrow listening, Neri pointed with her small snout. Not to everything, only to what is near. Miran looked around. A leaf brushed by. A slow current moved from left to right. Somewhere nearby, tiny fish clicked around the stems. He noticed that one pathway opened slightly each time the current leaned a certain way. "I think I see," he whispered. Neri nodded. Large creatures often believe small places are not for them. But every place allows passage to those who move with respect. She guided him through the forest in a path he never would have chosen on his own. Sometimes they waited for the kelp to sway aside. Sometimes she led him lower, where the stems were farther apart. Sometimes she asked him to pause and simply observe which way bits of floating grass were drifting. Little by little, the forest changed in his eyes. What had felt confusing began to feel patterned. What had felt closing began to feel alive. As they traveled, Neri said, "When I was young, I wished I were fast like the fish or powerful like the seals. But the kelp taught me that size is only one kind of strength. Small creatures notice things, large creatures miss." Miran thought about the reef and Luma's lesson about looking properly. He thought about Solon and steady time. The ocean was indeed giving him lessons, one after another, each in a different shape. "Sometimes," he admitted, "when I feel small inside, I think that means I am not ready." Neri drifted beside his cheek. Feeling small only means you have found something bigger than yourself. That is not failure. That is perspective. He repeated the word softly. Perspective. "Yes," she said. "It can be very comforting." At last, the water ahead began to brighten. The kelp grew thinner. A gentle lane of blue opened before them. "There," said Neri, "the edge of the forest." Miran felt relief, but also gratitude. He was glad to leave the shadowed maze, yet he knew he would not forget it. The forest had not become less mysterious. He had simply learned how to move within it. At the boundary where open water returned, he turned to Neri. "Thank you. I was afraid I did not belong there." Neri curled her tail around a strand of kelp once more. "You belonged there as a guest," she said, "and you learned how to behave like one." The evening light filtered green gold around her. For a moment, she looked like a small lantern hanging in a living forest. "I will remember," said Miran. "Good," Neri replied. "And when the world feels too large, notice what is near. When the world feels too close, remember that it will open again." With that, she vanished gently back into the swaying leaves. Miran swam onward into the widening blue. The sea ahead still held unknown things, but his fear no longer felt like proof of weakness. It felt like a doorway through which patience, attention, and humility could enter. And as the kelp forest faded behind him, Miran understood that even getting lost could become a kind of lesson, if he met it softly enough. The next day brought a different kind of challenge. The ocean floor below rose into long walls of stone, and the water narrowed between them into a passage where currents quickened and curled. From above, the place might have looked simple, a blue channel between sea cliffs, leading from one stretch of open water to another. But from within, it was full of moving force. The current pressed and pulled in changing directions. Water spun around jutting rocks. Cold streams slipped beneath warmer layers. Even the sound was stronger here, a constant rushing murmur that echoed off the cliffs and made the passage feel alive. Miran paused at the entrance. He could see the way through. He could also feel that it would not be easy. Part of him wanted to hurry and get it over with. Another part wanted to wait until the sea somehow became simpler. But he already knew that waiting for the world to become simple was not the same as becoming ready. So he stayed still and listened. He listened outward first. The faster water near the surface slapped and hissed around the rocks. Deeper down, there was a lower hum where the current moved more steadily. Between the two, he could feel bands of water crossing at angles. Then he listened inward. His body knew things. His worry had not yet sorted into words. When he tipped too high, he felt exposed to the strongest push. When he angled lower, the water, though still powerful, seemed more direct. A small group of dolphins leapt in the distance beyond the cliffs, their sleek shapes flashing for a moment in the light. They were quick enough to dance through such water. Miran was not built for that kind of movement. He would need another way. "Trust your pace," his mother had said. "Pace is a form of trust," Solon had added. "Notice what is near," Neri had reminded him. The lessons gathered around him like invisible companions. At last, he moved forward. He did not try to fight the entire channel. Instead, he entered along the side where the current first brushed the cliff, testing the strength of the water with careful motion. It caught his shoulder and pushed. He adjusted. A swirl tugged beneath him. He lowered one side of his body and let it pass. A stronger rush came from ahead, and for a moment, fear flared brightly inside him. He almost turned back, but then he realized something important. The fear was watching him, not warning him. The passage was difficult, yes, but not wrong. His heart was racing because the water was strong, not because disaster was certain. So he breathed. He looked again. Below, where the channel deepened, the current was smoother, fast, but cleaner. He angled downward and found that the pressure along his sides became steadier there. Still strong, still demanding, but readable. "That is better," he murmured to himself. The cliffs rose dark on either side, their surfaces furred with patches of waving weed and pale clinging shells. Sunlight broke above in moving fragments. Schools of small fish held near the rock faces, letting the passing water bring them food. Even here, in a place of force, life had found its positions of balance. Miran kept going. Once, a sideways current tried to press him toward a ridge of stone, and he had to sweep hard with his tail to correct himself. Once, a whirl of colder water rolled over his back and made him shiver. But each time, he returned to listening, adjusting, and choosing the next movement, rather than panicking over the whole distance. Halfway through, he found a pocket of calmer water behind a jutting wall of rock. He rested there for a few moments, feeling his heartbeat slow. The old version of himself, the one from the silver morning in the bay, might have called that stopping. But now he knew better. Resting in the right place was also part of traveling well. When he resumed, he did so with more confidence. The channel's language was not friendly exactly, but it was not cruel. It was simply precise. It rewarded attention. It ignored impatience. Soon the sound ahead changed. The rushing murmur opened into a broader, lower note. Light widened. The cliffs began to fall away. One final push of fast water carried him out into open sea. Miran let himself glide far beyond the passage before he finally slowed. Then he rose to the surface and breathed under a wide afternoon sky. The air tasted bright and clean. Behind him, the channel between the cliffs continued to churn and sing its restless song. Ahead, the ocean stretched open and blue. He laughed softly, not because the challenge had been small, but because he had crossed it without abandoning himself. "I listened," he said aloud. The sea, being the sea, did not answer in words, but a gentle swell lifted him, and he took it as agreement. As the sun drifted westward, he traveled on through calmer water. He felt stronger now, though not in the loud way he had once imagined strength. It was not a feeling of being able to conquer the sea. It was the quieter knowledge that he could meet difficulty without losing his center. By evening, the water beneath him deepened into indigo. The world below looked darker than before, and tiny points of pale light began to stir far down in the blue. Night was coming, and somewhere in the descending dark, another lesson was already waiting for him. Evening slipped across the ocean like a dark blue blanket. At the surface, the last orange light of sunset faded to grey, then violet, then deepening indigo. Below, the water became a layered mystery. Shapes softened. Distances vanished. The familiar outlines of the day dissolved into shadow. At first, Miran stayed near the surface, where the dim light from the sky still reached him. He had not realized until now how much comfort daylight gave him. In the daytime, even when places were strange, he could at least see. Now the sea seemed to open downward forever, vast and dark and unreadable. Then, far beneath him, a small green light appeared. It winked once, then another glowed blue, then three more, pale gold and silver white, drifting in the dark like tiny lanterns hung in invisible hands. Miran stared. The lights moved slowly upward, and as they came closer, he began to see the creatures who carried them. One was a jellyfish trailing soft ribbons that shone like moonlit silk. One was a fish with a little lantern on its head. One was long and thin, striped with faint living sparks. The dark did not vanish around them. It simply became beautiful. "Well," said a warm, floating voice, "you look as though you expected the deep to be empty." The speaker was the jellyfish, large and graceful, her bell glowing with a pearl blue light from within. "I did not know what to expect," said Miran honestly. "That is usually the beginning of wonder," she replied. "I am Orella." Around her drifted a small gathering of glowing companions, each illuminating a little pocket of water as they moved. Miran lowered himself a little, though not too quickly. "Does it not frighten you, living in such darkness?" Orella's ribbons streamed behind her in a soft, shining veil. "Darkness is only frightening when you believe nothing can be found there." One of the lanternfish bobbed proudly. "We find plenty." Another flashed in agreement. Orella circled Miran slowly, painting the water around him with moving blue light. "Come," she said. "You have traveled by sun. Tonight, you may travel by glow." They descended together, not deep enough for pressure to trouble him, but deep enough that the surface light faded almost completely. In its place rose a new sort of beauty. Tiny points of living light blinked here and there. Threads of brightness drifted through the water. Now and then, a creature passed and left a brief silver-green trail in its wake. Miran felt his fear return, but gentler now. It sat beside awe. "How do you know where to go?" he asked. Orella smiled in her slow, radiant way. "Not every journey is guided by seeing far. Some are guided by noticing what glows near." That sounded very much like Neri's lesson, only wrapped in night. They passed a group of transparent shrimp that flashed when startled, turning the dark momentarily into a burst of stars. They glided above a deep shelf where pale lights pulsed in patient patterns, as if the sea floor itself were breathing. A ribbon-like creature spiraled upward, lit from within in shifting bands of soft violet. Everywhere Miran looked, the dark contained hidden company. At length, Orella led him to a quiet hollow between deep water ridges, where the current slowed and many glowing creatures rested together. Some dimmed their lights. Some brightened and faded in calm rhythms. The place felt like a lantern room at the bottom of the world. "We gather here when the water is kind," Orella said. Miran hovered among them, surrounded by floating lights. "It is peaceful." "Yes," she said. "Darkness can be peaceful too. It invites different senses, different trust." He thought about all the times he had feared what he could not yet understand. The reef had asked him to notice. The turtle had asked him to slow. The forest had asked him to attend to what was near.
The cliffs had asked him to listen inward. Now the deep was asking him not to assume that darkness meant emptiness.
Aurelia drifted closer. There will be moments on every long journey when you cannot see very far ahead. In those moments, do not decide too quickly that you are lost. Sometimes you are simply traveling by a smaller light. Miran let the words settle like glowing dust. For a while he rested among the lantern creatures. No one hurried him. No one asked him to be anything other than present. The dark water around them felt full of quiet breathing and subtle sparkle. When at last he rose again toward the surface, the night above had fully arrived. Stars shone faintly overhead, where the sea mirrored the sky. Aurelia and her companions paused below him, each a small living flame in the blue. "Thank you," said Miran. "I think I was afraid of the dark, because I thought it was nothing." Aurelia's gentle light brightened for a moment. The dark is often where hidden beauty waits most patiently. With that, she and the others drifted downward again, their lights growing smaller and softer until they looked like a distant constellation beneath the sea. Miran remained near the surface, floating under the night. He did not feel fully brave yet, but he felt less alone inside the dark. And that, he thought, was its own kind of light. He slept then as whales do, resting lightly, moving slowly, half held by the sea and half aware of the stars above, while the ocean carried him onward beneath a velvet sky. Sometime in the middle of the night, the sea changed its breathing. Miran woke first to the pressure in the water, then to the wind gathering above. When he rose to the surface, the stars had disappeared behind a thickening ceiling of cloud. The air no longer felt smooth. It came in restless gusts, carrying the sharp scent of rain. Far away, a low roll of thunder passed over the water. Miran looked around. The ocean, so calm beneath the moon before, now lifted in long, darker swells. None were enormous yet, but they moved with growing purpose. A storm, he thought. Not a wild, tearing storm, perhaps, but enough to test a young traveler alone at sea. For a moment, fear rushed through him so suddenly that it almost felt like cold water inside his chest. He imagined waves too high to read, wind too loud to think through, rain that erased the horizon. Then the first drops fell. They struck the surface in scattered silver taps. The wind rose another step. The swells steepened. Miran nearly swam hard in one direction just to feel he was doing something. But the lessons he had gathered over the journey stopped him. Rushing had rarely helped him. Listening had. So he steadied himself and began. Outward first. The storm was moving from his left. The strongest waves built where the wind ran longest over the water. Beneath the surface, however, the sea remained more orderly than it looked from above. The upper layers were rough, but deeper down there was steadier motion. Inward next. His heart was fast, yes, but his body was not panicked beyond reason. He could still choose. He could still pace himself. This was not helplessness. This was weather. A stronger wave lifted him suddenly. Rain swept over his back in a cool sheet. Thunder sounded again, closer this time. "All right," he whispered, though he did not yet fully feel all right. "One wave at a time." He angled downward, just enough to move beneath the most chaotic surface chop, and there the storm became less violent. He could still hear it overhead as a roar and rattle. He could still feel the sea's heaving power. But now the water wrapped around him with more consistency. He swam with the swells rather than against them, rising and lowering in long arcs. When he needed air, he timed his surfacing between larger waves and breathed quickly but steadily before descending again. It was not easy. Rain blurred everything above. Lightning flashed once within the clouds, turning the surface white for a heartbeat. A sideways shove of water rolled him enough to unsettle his balance. Fear returned again and again, each time asking whether he should be more frightened than he already was. Each time, Miran answered with action. Breathe. Listen. Adjust. Continue. Hours seemed to stretch, though perhaps it was less. Storm time felt different from ordinary time. It narrowed the world to essentials. At one point, he remembered Aurela's words. Sometimes you are traveling by a smaller light. He could not see any glowing companions here. Yet there was a small light inside him now, a gathered steadiness made from every lesson he had received. Luma had taught him to notice properly. Solon had taught him to receive time steadily. Neri had taught him to attend to what was near. The cliffs had taught him to trust the body's reading of danger. Aurela had taught him not to confuse darkness with emptiness. He was not alone in the storm. He was carrying everyone with him. That thought warmed him. Near dawn, the rain softened. The thunder moved farther away. The wind still pushed the water, but less fiercely now. When Miran surfaced again, the clouds had begun to thin in places, and a pale seam of light appeared in the east. He floated there for a long moment, rising and falling on the leftover swells. The storm had not been gentle, but neither had it broken him. He felt tired now, deeply tired, in body and mind. Yet beneath the fatigue was a new, quiet certainty. He had moved through fear without becoming it. He had been brave, not in the shining, heroic way of stories told too loudly, but in the truer way of staying present when leaving would have been easier. A small seabird skimmed low over the water, then vanished into the growing dawn. "I did it," said Miran, almost shyly. The ocean around him was still grey and restless, but the words felt real. As morning spread, the waves eased into longer, gentler forms. The air smelled washed and clean. Here and there, the clouds opened enough for bands of silver sunlight to touch the sea. Miran swam forward slowly, giving himself permission to recover. By midday, he reached calmer northern water, cooler now, with a brightness of its own. The sky cleared more fully. The sea turned blue-white under the sun. Ahead, far in the distance, he began to see shapes like floating islands of glass. Ice. A thrill went through him. He had reached waters his mother had once described in soft nighttime songs. Tired but steady, washed by storm and strengthened by it, Miran lifted his head to the northern light and kept going. The northern sea felt different from every water Miran had known before. It was colder, yes, but also clearer somehow, brighter in a quiet way. The sky stretched pale and immense above him. The air held a crisp stillness after the storm, and floating all around were shapes of ice, some small and shining, some broad as drifting hills, all glowing blue-white beneath the sun. When Miran swam below them, the ice changed the light into something magical. It filtered the day into silver beams and soft turquoise shadows. The sea itself seemed to sing in higher notes here, with clicks and distant cracks and long resonant hums beneath the water. Then he heard another sound, a whale song. It came from farther ahead, deep and layered, carrying through the cold water in slow, beautiful phrases. One voice answered another, then another joined. The music was not hurried and not sad. It felt ancient, spacious, and sure. Miran followed it until he found a small group of whales traveling beneath a long shelf of floating ice. They were larger than he was, marked by the miles of many seasons, and they welcomed him with calm curiosity. One of them, a broad-backed whale with a scar like a pale crescent near one eye, drifted beside him. "You have come far for one so young," she said. "My name is Miran," he replied. "I am Senra," she said. "Travel with us for a while, if you wish." He did. Together they moved under the ice road, where light poured through cracks and thin places overhead like liquid silver. Sometimes the whales sang. Sometimes they were quiet. Both felt equally full. After a time, Miran asked, "How do you know where to go in such a wide world?" Senra seemed to consider how best to answer. Partly memory, partly the earth beneath the sea, partly the sun, the currents, the cold, the stars, and partly something that is difficult to name, but easy to feel. "Instinct?" he asked. She nodded. "Yes. A hidden map carried in the heart and body." That pleased him. He had felt something like that already while crossing the current between the cliffs, a knowing that came before thought had time to explain itself. "But how do I trust it?" he asked. "What if I hear it wrongly?" Senra's song hum vibrated softly through the water. Instinct is not the same as panic. Panic shouts. Instinct is quiet. It returns. It remains steady when you make room for it. They passed beneath an arch of ice so thin and blue that it looked lit from within. Bubbles clung to its underside like strings of pearls. Many young travelers, Senra continued, wait for certainty to arrive like a loud command. But often guidance comes as a gentle repetition. Turn here, rest now, go deeper, surface soon, stay calm. The more gently you listen, the more clearly you hear. Miran let himself drift beside her in thoughtful silence. Later, they came to a broad open lead, where the ice parted and the pale sky reflected on the water like polished glass. The whales rose to breathe. Their breaths lifted into the cold air as shining mist. Miran looked around in wonder. It feels like the world is made of light. Senra smiled. In some places, it nearly is. Another whale in the group began a low melodic phrase. Senra answered. Soon the cold water filled with music. Slow, echoing, patient music that seemed shaped as much by distance as by sound. Miran listened, then cautiously added a few notes of his own. The others welcomed the small offering at once, weaving his simpler song into their larger one. In that moment, floating between sea and ice and sky, Miran felt something settle inside him. Not pride exactly, not even confidence alone. Something deeper. A sense that he belonged not only to his home bay, but to the greater music of the ocean itself. By evening, the light softened into long silver blue. Senra and the others prepared to turn farther north, toward feeding grounds beyond where Miran planned to go. Our paths divide here, she said. He felt sudden sadness. I wish I could keep traveling with you. You are, Senra said gently, just not beside us. She touched one fin lightly to his in farewell. Trust the quiet map. It has been growing in you since the first day you left home. Miran looked back the way he had come. South lay far beyond the horizon. Home was very distant now. Yet instead of fear, he felt a calm pull, a sense that the journey would soon begin curving inward and back. I think I know, he said softly. Not everything, but enough for the next part. That is all anyone ever truly has, said Senra. When they departed, their songs lingered long after their bodies had faded into the pale northern blue. Miran remained beneath the ice road a while longer, letting the echoes move through him. Then he turned southward. The sea ahead was still vast, but now, within that vastness, he could feel direction, not as a line painted on the water, but as a quiet faith that returned whenever he became still enough to notice it. The journey home began in silence. Not an empty silence, but a rich one. A silence filled with remembered songs, with reef colors, with green shadows of kelp, with glowing deep lanterns, with the rhythm of rain on storm-dark water, with the clean brightness of ice. All of it traveled inside Miran now. He moved south at an unhurried pace, following the guidance Senra had named so clearly. the hidden map carried in the heart and body. Sometimes he rose and saw stars at night reflected on the sea. Sometimes he swam through broad afternoon light while currents slid under him like invisible roads. Sometimes he rested in calm patches and let the ocean hold him without asking anything more. The remarkable thing was this: the sea had not become smaller, yet it no longer felt overwhelming. It felt knowable in pieces, not because he had seen all of it, but because he had learned how to meet what he had not yet seen. One dusk, while the water glowed with the last faint rose of sunset, Miran noticed his own reflection in the surface beneath him. He paused. The whale looking back was the same Miran who had left home under a silver morning. Yet he was not the same. His body still carried youth in its lines. His eyes still widened with wonder. But there was more calm in him now, more waiting space before fear turned into action, more trust in quiet choices. He thought of the calf who had stood at the edge of the bay, listening to everything at once and fearing that all the sounds disagreed. Now he understood that they had not disagreed. They had simply belonged to different kinds of knowing. Wind, wave, body, heart, memory, instinct. Each had its own voice. He had learned not to confuse them. As he traveled, he sometimes met other creatures, though none stayed long. A pair of seals dozed on a drifting log and lifted sleepy faces as he passed. A spiral of silver fish encircled him for a playful moment before vanishing into blue. A gull shadow crossed overhead and moved on. These brief meetings felt lovely, but he did not chase them. He no longer needed every moment to prove something. Travel itself had become enough. One afternoon he returned to waters warmer and greener than the far north. He knew, before recognizing any exact landmark, that he was entering the world of his earlier lessons. There was the kind of current that signaled stone passages nearby. There was the soft taste of drifting kelp in the water. There was the warmer upper layer that often lay above reef country when the weather was kind. He smiled to himself. Soon he came upon a familiar patch of open sea, where the surface moved in long, calm lines, and the water below shimmered with layered blue. It was not far from where he had once met Solon. The turtle was not there, but Miran rested anyway, letting time open around him just as Solon had taught. He remembered how impatient he had felt then, without knowing it. How eager to reach somewhere and become someone. Now he understood that becoming had been happening all along. That evening, he passed near the edge of the kelp forest again. He did not need to enter, yet he slowed long enough to watch the leaves sway. What had once looked like confusion now looked like choreography. "Thank you, Neri," he murmured to the green-gold shadows. The next day, coral light shimmered below him. He did not stop for long at the reef, but he circled once in affection, noticing details with easy love. He even glimpsed a flash of bright blue that might have been Luma darting between coral towers, though he could not be sure. "Travel gently, big thinker," he remembered her saying, and laughed softly into the water. At sunset on the following day, the sea spread wide and calm before him, painted with gold and lavender light. The horizon ahead held a curve he knew before he fully saw it. Home. A warmth gathered in his chest so suddenly that he nearly surged forward too fast. Then he smiled at himself and slowed. There would be enough time. He had learned that too. As night came on, a silver path of moonlight laid itself across the water, leading straight toward the bay. Miran followed it, calm and full. He did not think, "I am finally brave now." He did not think, "I understand everything." Instead, he thought something simpler and truer. "I can keep learning." And in that thought was freedom. Because the ocean would always remain larger than any one journey. There would always be more to notice, more to trust, more to wonder at. But that no longer made him feel small in a lonely way. It made him feel alive. With the moon guiding the water into brightness before him, Miran swam onward through the quiet night toward the voices of home beginning to rise faintly through the sea. The bay appeared under moonlight as if it had been waiting in a dream. Its familiar curve of water lay silver and still beneath the night sky. The dark shapes of rock and kelp stood where they always had. The gentle echo of home sounds, distant whale song, small splashes near the shallows, the hush of waves against stone, reached Miran before he crossed into the sheltered water. He slowed, not from hesitation now, but from tenderness. After so much wide sea, the bay felt close and beloved, not smaller than the world, but warmer within it. He moved through the entrance quietly, following the pale moon path over the water. Then a low note rose ahead. Another answered. Then many. His family. The song wrapped around him before bodies came into view. It was the same home song they had offered when he departed, but fuller now, gladder, opening wide to receive him. Miran felt it travel through his chest and bones until his whole body answered with joy. His mother reached him first. She circled once around him, touching close enough that he could feel the strength and relief in her movement. "You have been far," she said. "Yes," he answered, and the one small word seemed to hold reefs and storms and ice and lanterns and songs. She studied him, not only with her eyes, but with the deep knowing of a mother who can hear change even in silence. "And you have been listening?" Miran smiled. "Very much." Other whales gathered nearby, humming soft greeting notes. Younger calves peered at him with round, curious eyes. The older whales held their steady, welcoming calm. The bay glimmered with moonlight and reunion. They led him toward the quieter center water, where the current was gentle and the family often rested together at night. There he settled among them, held by familiar sounds and familiar breathing. For a while, no one asked for stories. Home wisdom knew that returning itself is an event. Rest comes first. So Miran floated in the company of those he loved and let the journey arrive fully inside him. At last his mother asked, "What did the sea teach you?" The question was simple. The answer was not. He looked up at the moon, then around at the silver water, then down into the dark where the bay opened quietly toward the greater ocean. "It taught me that courage can be soft," he said. "At first, I thought courage meant pushing past fear quickly, but it was more like staying gentle and steady while fear moved beside me." His mother listened without interrupting. "The reef taught me to notice properly," he continued. "A turtle taught me that journeys are not races. In the kelp forest, I learned that feeling small does not mean I am helpless. Between the cliffs, I learned to listen to what my body knows. In the deep, I learned that darkness is not empty. In the storm, I learned that I could remain myself even when the world grew rough. And in the northern waters, I learned that instinct is like a quiet map." The older whales hummed softly, pleased. One of the calves drifted closer. "Was it scary?" he asked. Miran looked at him kindly. "Sometimes, but scary and beautiful often lived beside each other." The calf seemed to think this was very important. His mother lowered her voice. "And what did you learn about coming home?" Miran was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That returning is not the same as staying the same." The moonlight trembled across the water between them. "I left home thinking the world was divided between here and everywhere else," he said. "But now I think home comes with us in some way. In the songs we remember, in the pace we trust, in the kindness we have been given. And when we return, home grows too, because we bring new understanding back with us." A deep approving note moved through the pod. His mother touched her fin lightly to his. "That is a good journey's answer." The bay fell quiet again, but it was a full quiet now, rich with shared feeling. One by one, the younger whales settled. The older ones held a low, restful song beneath the moon. Miran floated among them and let his body finally release the last small tensions of travel. He felt tired in the sweetest way. Not worn out, but completed. Beyond the entrance of the bay, the great ocean still stretched under the stars. It remained vast. It remained mysterious. There were still places he had not seen, currents he had not followed, creatures he had not yet met. He did not need that to trouble him. There would be other journeys in other seasons. For now, this one was enough. He closed his eyes halfway and listened to the blended breathing of his family, to the hush of the bay, to the distant pulse of the open sea beyond. All of it belonged together. Before sleep took him, he thought of the morning when he had left. He had believed a journey might make him bigger. In a way, it had. But not by stretching him into something loud or grand. It had made more room inside him. More room for wonder, more room for patience, more room for trust, more room for the quiet courage that keeps moving, one wave at a time. And under the silver path of the moon, with home around him and the ocean beyond, Miran slept. The sea breathed in, the sea breathed out, and all was calm.